Well, in Blood in the Cage, I just try to, more than anything, I just kind of try to make sense of this phenomenon, that it's undeniable that UFC, mixed martial arts, cage fighting, it's here to stay. It's immensely popular right now. It's immensely profitable right now. What's driving this? What really goes on inside that octagon? Who are these fighters? Really sort of explore the culture. And I use a former champion who's now a great trainer, Pat Miletich. I sort of braid his story with the rise of this whole sport in Blood in the Cage. And, I'll admit to being a fan, but it's really not so much advocacy. It's just trying to explain what's going on and how this sport that John McCain, of all people, was dismissing as cockfighting not so long ago, how this has become the billion-dollar enterprise it is right now. I guess the way this came about was I'm a writer for Sports Illustrated as my day job, and I kept hearing about this sport, mixed martial arts, and the UFC, and I kept sort of seeing these figures, these phenomenal growth figures. And I think most people, they think of cage fighting, and immediately they see two men in a cage, and they think this is something out of, this is the Romans and the lions. And I tried to sort of explore it with an open mind. What is it about this sport that's made it so popular? What's really going on here? Is this really the new NASCAR? Or, is this Ultimate Gladiator, is this American Gladiators, or is this the XFL, just a fad we're all going to be laughing about in 10 years? So I did a story for Sports Illustrated and tried to keep an open mind. And really, I came away pretty impressed. It wasn't as barbaric or as violent as I thought it was. The guys were much better athletes than I ever expected. Everybody had a good story to tell. It didn't really bother me morally. I mean, one of the selling points the UFC always says, oh, it's safer than boxing and it's safer than football. But I talked to some experts who were a little more objective, and they agreed with that. So, I came away from that story thinking that this was for real, and I realized afterwards I was still following the results, and the fighters I had met and reporting the story, I was still curious how they were doing, and it ended up making the cover of Sports Illustrated and got a nice reception, so I sort of thought I'd try and spin it into a bigger project, sort of dilate it into a book. I experienced this seduction of MMA. I think some of it has to do just sort of with gut base reactions, running with the bulls, adrenaline rushes. But more than that, I think the fact that it's not just two guys bum, 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 boxing for 3-minute rounds. The fact that it can go to the ground, there can be kicks, you can win a fight in so many ways, also means you can lose a fight in so many ways. I think that has something to do with it. I think some of the seduction is how these fighters, who they are and how they're marketed. That it's not thug athletes, it's not, contrary to what a lot of people think, it's not two guys that just got pulled out of the drunk tank or off their bar stool. I mean, these are good athletes. So you feel as though they're going in there with preparation. You don't feel, this isn't watching a bar fight. I mean, these are two guys who are trained for this and exceptional athletes. And, you look at the presentation, you look at how these UFC fights come off, whether it's on pay-per-view or in the arena, and they really do a great job making it feel like an event. I've been to plenty of boxing cards, and you don't have nearly the intensity, nearly the rush that you do watching, two guys fighting in the UFC. So to sort of center the book, I tried to braid the story of Pat Miletich with the rise of mixed martial arts in the UFC. And I think Pat, like a lot of fighters, when he was growing up, there was no MMA, but he was a tough kid, Iowa kid, wrestled, played football, pretty good street fighter. And he came to the sport pretty late. He came to it in his 20s, and first he learned, he sort of knew how to fight a little bit. He knew what to do on the ground, and he learned the kickboxing and the Muay Thai, and really picked up the sport, really sort of picked up all the different components to become a very complete fighter, was a successful 5-time UFC champion, and now owns this training gym. And I think in a lot of ways he sort of was emblematic of the sport, that it started, what wasn't really on the radar 20 years ago. 10 years ago it was still a rough product that was finding itself, and now is this thriving above-board enterprise. And he, this was a tough guy who used to get in bar fights, and now he lives on a cul-de-sac in Iowa and has a wife and 2 daughters. And I thought in a lot of ways that sort of mimicked UFC, which was this back alley sport, and now, you can't log on to the internet without seeing it on a mainstream site. Well, the rules are evolving. I mean, there were essentially no rules to begin with. Groin shots were permitted and hair pulling. They're now more than 30. Again, people say that, and then you look at them, and things like no soccer kicks to the head, and no fish hooking open lacerations don't exactly this is not a cello recital, but there are rules to ensure fighter safety. And again, when you watch the sport, especially when you watch it up close, and especially even when you see the losers afterwards, for me anyway, the queasiness went away. That you look at the rules and you see no fingering open lacerations, and you cringe. But when you see this not in a rule book, but you see this actually up close, you realize it's not as barbaric as one might think reading a rule book. Yeah, I'm a writer on staff at Sports Illustrated and have been for 12 years now. I sort of cover a little of everything. I end up doing a lot of tennis. Not a fighter by any stretch, but I've covered boxing. Certainly, sort of have these libertarian sensibilities about most things. If two guys want to get in there and fight and they know the risks, God bless them. And I like subcultures. I like my last book was on pool hustling, and it was fun to sort of probe and figure out. We have vague ideas of what it is, but really get in there and who are these people and what do they get out of this? And this was, I thought, a similar experience that we see cage fighting. Most people, when they flip the dials, they've probably heard inevitably that this sport is gaining in popularity. But really, what's going on here? What are these fights like? What's it like to be in there fighting? And who are these fans that are so rabid about the sport? So that's sort of what drove me to write Blood in the Cage.